Hey guys, welcome back to the Chase with Jace. I'm your host, Jace Lejeune of Gridiron Football, and we were off a week. Like the Tigers, we took a week off ourselves, but we're back on it, back to the grind because there's a pretty important game on Saturday night, and it's going to be between the LSU Tigers and the Alabama Crimson Tide. And helping me preview this colossal matchup in the SEC is one of my good buddies, Zack Nagy of Sports Illustrated, the LSU Tigers on SI. Does a great job, keep up with his work all the time. Just puts out a lot of great content, especially updating on players and how they're doing, and does a great job of his work. So, Zack, what's going on, my man?
Man, not too much. We're recovering from that bye week. It was fun, and now it's kind of full steam ahead. We move on to this big time matchup. Stakes couldn't be higher. So, no, I'm excited to talk about it. We got a big one in Death Valley on Saturday night, and let's talk about it. I'm excited.
Yeah, very big game, and it feels like a playoff game. I mean, it pretty much is essentially a playoff elimination game right now. When LSU's coming in at number 15 in the college football playoff poll that was just released last night, and Alabama comes in. It's going to be weird seeing an Alabama team come in Tiger Stadium and not see Nick Saban at the helm. Will be weird to watch, but Kalen DeBoer leading the Alabama Crimson Tide. You can say the biggest game. I know they played Georgia earlier this year, but you can say for him, biggest game of his young career at Alabama. And a huge game. It feels like a college football playoff elimination game. I know we got a chance to ask Brian Kelly about it, Zach, and Brian was like, hey, from now on, for every team in the SEC, it's pretty much like an elimination game anyway, because a lot of teams at least with one loss. So, Zach, just your thoughts on this weekend and how colossal this game is for both LSU and Alabama.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a college football playoff elimination game. And obviously, Alabama snuck in there. They got their little Bama bump in the initial power rankings for the college football playoff. But at the end of the day, if they drop one more, they're out. And the same thing goes for LSU. So they're really going to be pushing in there. And you got two programs coming in there for that elimination game. And we've seen Paul Feinbaum make statements, Joel Klatt from Fox Sports, etc. Everybody really just talking about it. It's a playoff eliminator. And you gotta come out and click on all cylinders. You gotta play complimentary football for 4 quarters. And I know you and I talked about how we would kind of talk a little bit about A&M for better or for worse. And
Yeah,
ultimately, you saw LSU play that complimentary football for 2 quarters and not four, and it was the thorn in their side at the end of the day. So it's really all about coming out and playing complimentary football. And if LSU can do just that, they'll put themselves in good position. But nonetheless, we have a colossal matchup in Death Valley on Saturday night. Kalen DeBoer and company making their way in town. And you're going to have college game day there. You're going to have Nick Saban back in the mix. It couldn't be bigger. The stars are going to be showing out in Baton Rouge that day. And it's just about as big as it gets. Prime time in Death Valley. You can't really ask for much more.
that's great transition, Zach. When we talk about Texas A&M, I know we said before we would start recording, we'd talk about the Texas A&M game. And when I wrote my game piece about it after the fact, I said this was the exact opposite of the previous game before, which was Arkansas. You're playing complementary football when one side, what was the offense or the defense, special teams, all that played in unison. It really fed off each other. It was, and even for the first half, it felt like that too in the A&M game. Now the second half was the exact opposite. I mean, you
Right.
saw when Garrett Nussmeier threw an interception, defense gave up a touchdown to Makai Reed, just really next play. And the special team struggled, had a chance to go up by 6. You missed a field goal there. Actually, the field goal wasn't even attempted because the snap went over the long snappers. Wasn't paying Todd, wasn't even paying attention to the snap. So, really rough day for Damian Ramos, who had a great game against Arkansas. Garrett Nussmeier had some great games this year, but that fell apart in the second half in the A&M game, throwing 3 picks. And then after the defense was just phenomenal in the first half against A&M, the quarterback change happened with sending Connor Wegman. You put Reed in the football game, and LSU could not stop the quarterback run. So that definitely fell apart in the second half and was the total opposite of what we've seen this LSU team really growing up to be, that complementary football team. And that went up to shambles in that second half in College Station.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you came out and you were clicking on all cylinders. You had Garrett Nussmeier making those NFL-like throws that everybody's been really kind of expecting from him at this point in time. And he was clicking. Him and Kyron Lacy were making plays. Aaron Anderson, kind of your third down guru, was making some fantastic plays right there. And then, look, we can sit here and talk about the first half all we want. They were playing complimentary football. Defensive coordinator Blake Baker dialed up a masterclass game plan to the point where you had to get Connor Wegman out of the game. So I think it's important to note the positives on that front. The first two quarters were fantastic. Blake Baker and the defense, he had them clicking. Offense, you were rolling. Second half rolls around. I don't know if I've quite seen one play determine the outcome of a game like I did when I saw Garrett Nussmeier throw that first interception in the third quarter. Rolling to his left, goes across his body. It's the one thing that you're taught as a young quarterback to never do is throw it across your body. And at that, it was a 50-50 ball too, where A&M ultimately got the interception to kind of sway the rest of the game. So at the end of the day, it was one that Nussmeier wants to put in the back of his mind. He talked about it yesterday during player interviews, just really talking about how he beat himself up. He didn't really abide by the 24-hour rule. He kind of let it beat him up for a couple more days. But it's in the rearview mirror now. You move forward, you move on, and you look forward to what's up next, and that's the Alabama Crimson Tide. So it was a tough second half in College Station, but now you put it in the rearview mirror, you move on ahead, and you got a colossal matchup this weekend in Death Valley.
Yeah, and Brian Kelly said that for the first 50 plays in that game, looked really good. It's just the last 20 were really bad, and he mentioned it against A&M. And we've seen this team, right? I mean, this has been a constant theme with this team this year. And he said you can argue against Ole Miss. The first 50 plays weren't so great against Ole Miss, but the last 20 were fantastic. And how they were able to finish that football game up is just trying to get this consistency. We've only seen it probably one time in SEC play, which was the Arkansas game, where they pretty much put it together through 4 full quarters. Now they're going to have to do that against Alabama, but like you mentioned, it was LSU's defense did a great job. They're playing better and better. You saw the growth and the improvement of this defense, and then the quarterback switch comes, and LSU's defense did struggle trying to defend the quarterback run game. But here, Zach, what I want to know about this, my next question coming up, is about the Alabama game right here, is being able to defend the quarterback run game with Jalen Milroe, because going into the game against Alabama that Jalen can beat you with his legs. Now, they haven't used Jalen as much as a runner as compared to last year, but he can still beat you with his legs. And Blake Baker and his defense is preparing, knowing that he is a quarterback that you will definitely be seeing on Saturday.
Yeah, this is a guy who is kind of making his money right now as that dual threat quarterback. He's making his money really with his legs right now. And I know the numbers might not show in comparison from last year to 2024, but this is a guy who's rushed for almost 400 yards on the season, double-digit touchdowns. He's doing a lot of work with his legs, but the rushing kind of beyond the line of scrimmage isn't what I'm necessarily worried about. It's that kind of ability to extend the play, roll out, find receivers, make them kind of make the defenders work. And LSU's cornerback play hasn't necessarily been stellar this season. So if he can extend the play and allow his receivers to kind of make those heroic plays, it's going to put Alabama in a really good position. So a lot of the work's going to come in the front, the Braden Swinsons of the world, Savion Jones, et cetera. You got to get the play in the backfield from your edge rushers to make him kind of work, make him stay in the pocket and work from there. But kind of carrying in a little bit more to your question, we saw LSU succeed against Taylon Green. I mean, Taylon Green, in my opinion, is one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the conference. So to kind of limit him in order to have a big-time win on the road in Fayetteville, to me, that speaks wonders. Do you go towards that exact same game plan here? I would lean probably towards yes. Obviously, you have some tweaks there because Milroe is a little bit more dynamic, but it all starts with the front. You have to have Braden Swinson and company make plays in the backfield, and then you have to watch who you're going to have spy. Is it going to be Greg Penn, or is he too slow? Is it going to be Whit Weeks, or can he not play the gaps as well? So you're going to have some tweaks there in the first quarter where you're going to see who's making the most of their opportunities, but it certainly presents a challenge. Jalen Milroe is one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the country. Pair that with freshman phenom Ryan Williams, who can go up and make just about every grab he wants. So it sets the table for a really good matchup in Tiger Stadium this weekend. It's just all about kind of containing them. The likelihood that you stop a guy like Milroe is far-fetched, but if you can contain him and make him kind of work for his kind of plays, you're going to put yourself in a good position here.
Right, and you saw with the Ole Miss game, right? I mean, this LSU defense did give up some plays, but when it came down to the red zone, came down with them bearing down and making some plays in the red zone, they held up, and that could be a recipe for this LSU defense. Play bend but don't break, and do not give up the big explosive play, whether it's like Milrow with his legs, or you mentioned Ryan Williams, and everybody talks about him being 17 years old each and every week, and then that's another question about him because LSU secondary. I mean, the cornerback room has improved from last year, and a big part, I think, the reason why LSU's defense has improved, and I'm sure you can agree with this, Zach, has been Zy Alexander being healthy. I mean, because it's allowed not only Zy to play free at cornerback, but you can put Sage Ryan at safety where he feels comfortable. You put Major Burns in at the star, and now he has a tough challenge against a guy like Williams. How do you think LSU can I guess limit his playmaking ability on Saturday night?
Yeah, so the versatility in the defensive backfield is something that sticks out like a sore thumb. Like you kind of alluded to just there. You have a guy like Zy Alexander who steps back into the mix. You can throw Sage Ryan back at safety. You can put Major Burns at the star role, but you can also put him at safety if you want as well. So
Mm-hmm.
there's tremendous versatility at the cornerback position. And fast forward to the rest of the defensive backfield. And for me, in order to limit a guy like Ryan Williams, it's going to be challenging to do that man on man. I mean, he's super talented. I mean, he's an uber talented player, and he leads that receiving core by a wide margin. 7 touchdowns on the year already. I believe it's like 700 plus yards, 35 catches. So he's doing some tremendous work there in the receiving room as a true freshman. And I know everybody wants to talk about the 17-year-old. I mean, if I had $1 for every time they've said that, I'd be pretty dang rich. So they talk about that religiously. But at the
Yep.
end of the day, yeah, I mean, he's 17 and he's tearing up SEC play. So it's just about maybe dropping back into a zone to cover him in all 3-4 phases that you can. Super talented player. You're not going to be able to have one guy stick on him, and that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be something that I'm going to keep tabs on here. Zy Alexander is a player who's battled the injury bug, and I know he's well conditioned, but is he conditioned enough to play all 4 quarters, every snap against a guy like Ryan Williams? Are you going to have to put Ashton Stamps on him at times as well? So you have a 1-2 punch of cornerbacks that are continuing
Mm-hmm.
to improve, develop, hit that next gear, but it's presenting a challenge against Ryan Williams, who's one of the top wideouts in the SEC. So it's a challenge right there. And the magic question really is, how do you contain him? It's going to be fun to watch with Blake Baker, Corey Raymond, et cetera, dial up.
Exactly, Zach, and we're joined by Zach Nagy at Z Nagy 20. Follow him on X. Does a great job of covering the beat for LSU, not only for football, for the other sports as well. I know Zach's getting pretty busy with the other sports coming up too, especially basketball tipping off as well. Now, Zach, especially with Blake Baker having 2 weeks really to game plan for this offense for the running game, should be very interesting of note. And let's move on to the offensive side of the football and talk about LSU's offense. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier, he's had a great season. I mean, he still has thrown for 20 touchdowns, leads the SEC in passing. Now, he's thrown some interceptions, like you mentioned, the 3 in the second half against A&M, coming off his worst half of football he's ever played. 9 interceptions this year. But a lot of it, I mean, I know that when you're the quarterback, you get majority of the praise when you win, you get the majority of the blame when you lose. But if you look back at that A&M game, LSU did struggle running the football when you have your quarterback throwing 50 times, and you could have Joe Burrow under center, but that 2019 offense, they could run the football with Clyde Edwards-Helaire when they needed to. And speaking of Jane Daniels, he was the running game, right? So that's a quarterback's best friend. So how much you think that's really plagued some of the interceptions? You know, Garrett Nussmeier's a gunslinger already when he doesn't have to throw it as much already. But how much you think the lack of the running game plagued some of those interceptions in the second half against A&M?
Yeah, I think when you have a lack of diversity in the play calling, it's certainly going to be a recipe for disaster. And you haven't had that push at the line of scrimmage in the run game, of course. That's something that's been the thorn in this program's side all season long. So for me, yeah, when you rely on Garrett Nussmeier to throw the ball 50 dang times, ultimately you're going to probably throw a pick or 2
Mm-hmm.
or 3, unfortunately. So at the end of the day, you got to start to diversify the playbook. And to me, it doesn't even need to be about kind of running the ball. It's about finding extensions of the run game, whether that be screen passes, kind of checkdowns, little shuffle passes to Xavier Thomas, Aaron Anderson, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Find different ways to get the ball into your playmakers' hands. It doesn't have to be these NFL throws after NFL throws every single time, tight windows, sideline every time. You're putting Nussmeier in a position to make these challenging throws that in turn are kind of going to put him in a position where he might throw a couple picks. And then, like you said, the quarterback's going to get all the praise, but they're also going to get all the critiques as well. So it's a challenging position for him to be in. And now you've had 2 weeks to kind of game plan with Brian Kelly, Joe Sloan, throw Garrett Nussmeier in the film room with them as well. You got to find different ways to get the offense clicking, and you can't put all the weight on Nussmeier's shoulders because, like you alluded to with the question, it's going to kind of make it a one-dimensional offense, and you can't have that against a team like the Alabama Crimson Tide, and even moving forward for the rest of the season as well. So it's about playbook diversity. If you can get that going, you're going to be in a good position, like I've kind of alluded to here.
Mm-hmm.
You can get that diversity rolling, get a little bit more creative, take the weight off of Nussmeier's shoulders. It'll put the offense in a good spot.
And it's a good point you mentioned there, Zach, because you look back at that A&M game, look at the Aaron Anderson touchdown pass.
Yep.
It was just a slant, and made two guys miss, outran everybody for the end zone. Like, put your playmakers, put them in space, give them the ball quickly, let them get those yards after catch to help your quarterback out. And you saw that even with the dump ball passes to Caden Durham too. Let him go out in open field, the screen passes. That's extra dimensions of the running game really help them out. So, and we'll see how LSU manages without Garrett Dellinger as well. I want you to allude to that as well, because I don't think either way with Dellinger in or out, it wasn't going to, I guess for better words, like totally change the running game in the A&M game. But it certainly helps having him in the lineup against Alabama. So what do you think LSU can manage that without him being in the lineup this Saturday?
Yeah, look, I mean, the running game hasn't been phenomenal all season, and Garrett Dellinger's been in the mix. So the
Mm-hmm.
only thing that you're missing is that experience, that pre-snap check ability of a veteran who's been there, done that. So to lose him certainly hurts in that aspect. But at the end of the day, your rushing attack has not been good, even with him
Mm-hmm.
on the field. So now you insert a redshirt freshman in Paul Mabenga, who has been, the staff's really high on him. They like what he provides. Obviously, you would have had Tyree Adams in the mix, but he's out for the
Yeah.
rest of the season with that sports hernia-like injury where he went under the knife and had surgery. So you insert a guy like Paul Mabenga, and we'll see what happens there. I think he's going to be in a good spot alongside Will Campbell, who's obviously one of, if not the best offensive tackles in the 2025 NFL draft. So he'll have a veteran next to him to help him out, and he has an SEC atmosphere under his belt playing in the second half against Texas A&M. So he's got a little bit of experience under his belt, minimal, but it's still a little bit. So kind of allowing him to get comfortable is going to be key here. Not having Dellinger does hurt, but it's also not the end of the world. So we'll see how they work there, see how that starting five works up front. Try to do what you can to give Nussmeier time in the passing game, and also try to open up a couple holes or two in the running game as well.
Yeah, it's just really first down. It's really big to stay ahead of the chains, help this passing offense when they can. Because LSU, I mean, as good as their passing offense is, you definitely need a running game. You definitely need to get that balanced out and just help out this passing offense as much as they can. Because we know if LSU's going to have to win this football game, they're going to have to still throw the football and be very productive throwing the football. And next question coming up. It's just really about this Alabama defense. This isn't like the Alabama defense of old when we saw with Nick Saban, and they were pretty much. I mean, you couldn't run the ball against them. Like, they were a brick wall, in the past. This is a different defense for Alabama. You can move the football against them. Just looking at what Alabama has defensively. I know Malachi Moore's a really good safety that they have, and they got some really good defensive players personnel wise, but LSU, there's some opportunities for this offense to move the football against this Bama defense, especially you played arguably some tougher defenses already this year in South Carolina, Texas A&M, some of those bigger defensive fronts that you had to play against.
Yeah, look, you've been there, done that now. You've played against an uber talented front in South Carolina led by Dylan Stewart, Kennard, etc. You've kind of had those challenges there, and you faced them well, and you came back in the second half and ultimately got the big time win. So you've been there when it comes to those challenging fronts. Now it's about continuing to work in the defensive backfield and see what people can do there. We obviously saw Texas A&M, what is it, BJ Mays or whatever his name is,
Yeah.
come out and make those fantastic plays and put LSU in a challenging position. So this is where Garrett Nussmeier needs to live in the film room. This is where Garrett Nussmeier needs to watch where Malachi Moore is on almost every single play,
Mm-hmm.
because this is a guy who leads the team in pass breakups with 5, interceptions with 2, third on the team in tackles. I mean, Malachi Moore is a fantastic player. He's a guy who's put them in position to win games week in and week out. But this kind of goes back to what I was saying a couple minutes ago. Obviously, you want to find extensions of the run game. You don't have to thread the needle to give 50-50 balls to Moore, where
Mhm.
you can make that phenomenal play or that phenomenal pass breakup. You kind of hit those check downs, you hit et cetera, to try to make the game get opened up to where you can eventually take a shot or two. So Nussmeier and Joe Sloan, I can imagine, are living in that film room right now, finding ways to kind of dissect that defense. Because, like you said, it's not that fantastic front that we're accustomed to with Alabama. Obviously, they got some dudes, they got some guys, but it's not what we're accustomed to when it comes to just stopping the run game in full force. They don't have necessarily those dudes up there right now. So now you
Mhm.
just got to continue to find what you can. And if it's those crossing routes, those slant routes, take those to your advantage. Because I really do think that that's going to be where you can find your bread and butter against this team.
Yeah, and I even asked Brian Kelly about this early. It was early in the year about just balancing that with Garrett Nussmeier, right? I mean, I think that's been kind of one of those things about him having his first year in the SEC. The balance because of him taking the deep shots. There are a lot of deep shots being called this year, and his ability because he can make those NFL throws that you alluded to earlier, but also taking what the defense can give you, whether it's like thinking it to Caden Durham or thinking it to Mason Taylor, or also, which we haven't seen not much at all, is him taking off and running and just picking up a couple yards when he can. So, how much you think we'll get more of a balance of that, knowing that Garrett Nussmeier probably saw what happens if you take too many shots, risky shots downfield and against
Yeah, I
Alabama.
mean, I think you brought up a fantastic point when it comes to Mason Taylor. That's a guy that I haven't even mentioned this entire time we've been speaking. And this is a
Hmm.
player who can obviously, I mean, I feel like, Jace, when you throw the ball to him, he catches it almost 10 out of 10 times,
Yeah.
no matter who's on him, no matter how heavily contested he is. He goes up and makes the grab. He's kind of your Mr. Consistent, your reliable piece that you can fall back on when need be. So I expect Mason Taylor to be implemented into this offense in a big way this weekend. Obviously, he has some history at home against Alabama, given that
Yeah.
two-point conversion to win the game in 2022. So he's going to try to be a repeat offender there and try to make the big-time plays when needed. But look, it's going to be about playbook diversity here. And you brought up
Hmm.
a great point with Garrett Nussmeier needing to use his legs a little bit more. When he has green grass in front of him, take off and run, man. He's
Yeah.
talked about it time and time again with the media. He's just talked about needing to expand his game and not become a dual threat quarterback, but
Right.
almost in a sense of a Joe Burrow like way, where he can kind of
Hmm.
just tuck and go when needed. You don't have to do it all the time, but just push the ball downfield. When you see green grass, take off and go because you're
Hmm.
going to get in front of the chains and make some big time plays. But getting back to the overall question, it's all about creativity in the play calling.
Hmm.
Try to get the extensions of the run game. This is the third time I've said it. I'm sitting here hoping that they can find ways to get the ball to the playmakers in open space just so Garrett doesn't have to throw these NFL like throws and these sideline throws time and time again. It's that saying that everybody says, KISS, right? Keep it simple,
Yeah.
stupid. So for
Right.
me, if you keep it simple, you're going to be in a really good position here to win the ball game. Keep it simple. Get it to your playmakers. Don't thread the needle every time. Take the shots when they're presented to you, and I think you'll be in a really good spot.
Yeah, it's a good formula to have. Keep the defense all balanced, right, and set some stuff up. I mean, you have a lot of weapons at receiver. With no doubt about it. Kyron Lace. We talked about Mason Taylor just now. You brought him up. I mean, C.J. Daniels looks like you're getting him back, hopefully healthy enough. Brian Kelly said he's healthier now than he was heading to A&M. Get Chris Hilton back, and hopefully he gets in a little bit of a rhythm after playing a game too. So Aaron Anderson's having a great season this year. So you have some of those weapons, use some of those weapons, and hopefully Joe Sloan can dial stuff up and create some separations for these wide receivers as well. Special teams wise, I know that was a disappointment too because that has been an improvement for the most part this year. Definitely in the return game with Xavier Thomas, one of those weapons we talked about. But I mean, you saw Damon Ramos be just so consistent and steady in that Arkansas game, time and time again, going 4 for 4 for field goal attempts. But really, we've seen this. We even saw this against Ole Miss. Just the timing, the execution, right, of like what Brian Kelly said, the battery, right, everything clicking together, and whether it's like the snap or the hold or the execution on the kick, you just saw it just a little bit off on the road against A&M.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to play perfect to beat a team like Alabama, right? And that's all three phases of the game. We've hit on the offense, we've hit on the defense, and the third and final slot is that special teams unit. And it was kind of a unique situation for Ramos, right? Like he was 4 for 4 against Arkansas, got the game ball in the locker room after, and then fast forward to A&M, and he just couldn't get things going. And for
Mhm.
me, you can put a lot of the blame on Ramos, but you can also put a little bit of the blame on the play calling. He missed a
Mhm.
48-yard field goal attempt, and then a drive 2 or 3 later. You come out on 3rd and long, you run a halfback draw, which puts you behind the line of scrimmage, and then you elect to kick a 49-yard field goal attempt fresh off of when he missed a 48-yard attempt. So
Right.
you put him in a position where it wasn't necessarily one to be successful. So that's 0 for 2 there. You look at the third one, obviously there's a mishap on the snap, and the rest is history there. So Damian Ramos is a guy who's becoming kind of Mr. Reliable. Put the A&M game as an outlier, throw that in the rearview mirror, and continue to stay true to what you've done. And that's become a consistent kicker for LSU football. I'm excited to see how he kind of shakes back after a week 9 where it was abysmal in College Station. And Brian Kelly talked about how they worked on special teams during the bye week, which is a foreign concept. That's not something that they're usually having to
Yeah.
do, is work on field goal attempts during the bye week. So they did that. They're sharpening their skill set, getting more polished on special teams. It's obviously going to be a critical factor on Saturday night in Death Valley. Click on all 3 phases. You're going to be in a good spot. I'm excited to see how Damian Ramos kind of takes that next step and recovers after a challenging last time he took the field.
Yeah, and both coaches came on the board. Brian Kelly, I even asked Coach Kelly about it earlier this week about both of them coming up the ranks and being Division II coaches and having the opportunity to coach at these big time programs. Now, came on the board is entering his first season at Alabama. He's replacing the greatest college football coach of all time, and Nick Saban. Brian Kelly's in his 3rd year. Basically, a playoff elimination game here. Zach, in your opinion, who do you think needs this game more? Is it Kalen DeBoer or is it Brian Kelly?
For me, obviously, I'm not even trying to be a homer, but for
Hmm.
me, it's Brian Kelly. You can kind
Yeah.
of set the tone post Nick Saban era. Obviously, you went out in your first season at the helm of LSU football and came out with a crazy victory in Tiger Stadium in 2022 over Alabama. And now, kind of, the Saban era is now in the rearview mirror. Now you have the
Hmm.
opportunity to set the tone. Kalen DeBoer and company are obviously thinking the exact same thing. But for Brian Kelly, it's his game to lose. All the
Yeah.
pressure's on him. You're at home. You're 13-0 in primetime games in Tiger Stadium. You have all the analytics on your side. And now you get to set the tone post Nick Saban era. So for me, all the pressure is on Kelly and the rest of the staff to come out and make a statement. You're sitting at number 15 in the college football playoff rankings. Bama's in. We're on the
Yeah.
outside looking in. So regardless, obviously, if you lose, whoever loses, say adios to
Right.
the rest of the season. But for me, it's all on Brian Kelly. You can set the tone post Saban era, continue to catapult your status into that college football playoff rank, and put yourself in a good spot. So I'm excited to see what he dials up alongside Joe Sloan, Blake Baker, etc. But for me, all the pressure's on Brian Kelly.
Yeah, well, good reason for LSU fans to be excited. Like you mentioned, he's been really good in prime time games. Like you mentioned, undefeated. He's lost only one home game at LSU in Tiger Stadium, and that was a early morning kickoff against Tennessee for his only loss. So huge opportunity for Brian Kelly. I know there's this mantra about Brian Kelly that he wins the games he's supposed to win. He gets you 9-10 win game seasons every year, but he can't win the big one, right? So this is an opportunity for Brian Kelly, like you mentioned, to change that mantra and defeat Alabama for the 2nd time in 3 years, which will be really huge. Big swing game there. Now, just to wrap this up, and of course, we'll get an opportunity for Zach to promote what he's got going on at SI. Zach, I know we talked about maybe some keys to the game. Huge game, obviously, game day being there. I'm going to be very interested to see how the LSU fans treat Nick Saban, especially with that past history. That's going to be intriguing to watch. But for you, Zach, what do you think is going to be the difference here? What are the keys to the game here for LSU? And I know it's still early. I know we're basically midweek here in Bama week, but do you have the Tigers pulling off with a victory and setting themselves up with a pretty good run potentially to the playoff?
Yeah, so when you kind of like look at the keys to the game, I'll pick 2 on both sides, right? You
Yeah.
gotta you gotta get Jalen Milroe and company to kind of slow down on first down. You can't allow them to get in front of the chains and set up easy 2nd and 3rd down conversions. So keep it short and sweet there. Try to contain them on first down, and then the second one is you got to have your defensive back stand up. I know the talk of the town is going to be your front, like your front 6, front 7, kind of slowing things down, but they're going to throw the ball. Milroe has a cannon; he can launch the ball deep when he wants to. So you have to have your DBs and your secondary as a whole really step up. So on defense, for me, limit the first down attempts. Obviously, don't let them get chunk yards. And then have your secondary step up to the plate. And then offensively, Garrett Nussmeier just got to keep it simple. Really just find your guys in open space. Don't thread the needle. Don't take shots when you don't need to. Be smart. Prove that you have the decision-making skills to be a first-round NFL quarterback, and continue to sharpen your skill set there, and then diversify the playbook. It's pretty cut and dry for me when it comes to that. If you can take the pressure off of Nussmeier, you'll really be in a really good position there. So really be simple with Garrett Nussmeier, and then diversify the playbook. And then when you look at a prediction for me, it's tough. Obviously, it's always a tough one in Tiger Stadium against a team like Alabama. The analytics point a lot towards Alabama, but the one stat that I'm going to stick true to is that 13-0 in Tiger Stadium during primetime games for Brian Kelly. So when I look at it, I say a 31-28 win for LSU. I know the spread's kind of fluctuating a little bit. It started at 1.5. Now it's hovering around 3. So a lot of the money's going on Alabama right now. But for me, I'm going to stay true to that 13-0 record in Tiger Stadium. I've seen Brian Kelly and this team do it time and time again, specifically a couple weeks ago against Ole Miss. I'm going to stick true to that, stick true to my gut, and say LSU wins this one 31-28. Brian Kelly propels his record in primetime games in Death Valley to 14-0, and place yourself right in the mix for a college football playoff berth.
Yeah, if LSU can get by Alabama and get this big win at home, it sets up really good for you after that, because even though you go on the road against Florida the next week, Florida's down to their third string quarterback right now. That's a walk on. So that's huge right there. And then probably your I guess you'd say the toughest game in that stretch would be at home against Vanderbilt, and then you end the regular season at home against Oklahoma. Zach, I know this is a big recruiting weekend as well for LSU, with a lot of big time names coming on campus, including Bryce Underwood as well. So I know you're going to be pretty busy on that side as well. Talk about some of the stuff that's going to be on the website, on social media, on X, and everything that you're publishing for Bama Week.
Yeah, look, you're in the middle of the thick of it all, the thick of the season right now. You got women's basketball on deck. You got men's basketball kicking off today on Wednesday. Alabama week as well. Monster recruiting weekend. So the list can go on. And obviously it's a pivotal recruiting stretch right now. You're gonna have Bryce Underwood on campus, DJ Pickett make his way in town as well. You're gonna have several 5-stars in the mix. Lamar Brown, 5-star from right down the road. So you got a deep list of recruits. Some flip targets also making their way in town. So it's a big time weekend. And so for me, look, you can follow me on X, follow me on Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at ZNAGY20. We're pumping out some content there. And then you can follow the SI site, and that's on Twitter as well, at LSU Tigers SI. So putting out a lot of content surrounding everything LSU related. Like I always say, if it's purple and gold related, we got it. So if you're not on socials, pump it into Google, put LSU Tigers SI, and you'll find all the stuff that we're putting out there. So it's Bama week, man. We got all the stuff that you need. Players to watch, betting odds, predictions, etc. So you name it, LSU related, we got it on the site. So make sure to check us out.
Absolutely. Check Zack out. ZNA, like you said, 20 is where you can follow him on X. Zack does a great job. Good friend of mine as well. So continue to pump up the good work, man. And I'll see you in Tiger Stadium on Saturday. It's going to be a great atmosphere. It's going to be a special atmosphere for sure. And it's going to be a fun one to enjoy. It's definitely going to feel like a college football playoff game.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you, Jace.
Absolutely. Well, make sure to check out Zach's work on Sports Illustrated as well. We'll also have a lot of LSU content too. I know we're busy getting ready for a Gridiron Football All-American Bowl game that we're putting on at the end of the year, with a lot of great high school talent that'll be taking part in that football game. But we got some LSU coverage as well, including the show. We'll have a game preview up by Thursday as well. So we'll give you inside analysis between the Tigers and the Tide. And we'll also give our predictions as well on who will come up on top on Saturday. So for Zach, I'm Jace. So we'll see y'all next time on another good edition. Hopefully it'll be a winning edition next week of the Chase with Jace.